This week's topic, last week we discussed starting cattle, starting with cattle, incorporating cattle into your farm or into your ranch. And this week we're gonna talk about sheep in the same sort of context, like things to think about if you're thinking about adding sheep on to your existing farm, or even if you have no experience with livestock and you're thinking about starting sheep. That's going to be our little discussion for the day. So I guess maybe let's start off with like things to think about, like getting into sheep, just straight up.
Straight up.
Yeah.
Things to be concerned, as well as just like the advantages.
Yeah.
So first off, sheep are a lot smaller and more
Well, I mean, but it's
cheaper
important.
than cattle.
It's important.
Yes.
They're a lot smaller than cattle.
Smaller and cheaper than cattle to buy. If you're looking at, see, Greg's for one of Greg's
Which
lambs.
is about top of the market.
This is me. I think
It's fine. If it's choppy, there's nothing we can do about it. We'll just keep rolling.
we don't need to do questions until the end. Anyways.
Yeah.
Anyways,
So
top of the market would be like
$350
dollars per
for
ewe.
you.
Whereas if you're looking at top of the market heifer, or like one of Greg's heifers, 3,500. So 10 times cheaper, roughly.
Yeah.
To get into. Sheep also, since they're smaller, there's less of a chance of them hurting you. You know, they're safer for you, and if you have children, they're a lot safer for children.
Yep.
You don't have to be as worried about,
Like the worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a little bit bruised. Even if you're a small kid, it's probably a little bit more of a big deal. But for a full-grown person, getting run into the back with by like a leaping ewe or wither or whatever,
it doesn't even leave a bruise.
Yeah. So
you're good.
yeah, I mean versus cattle where you could literally die if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So that's a huge thing, especially for people who have no experience with livestock or with kids. That's a big that's a big one for sure. And sort of along those lines, because they're smaller, basically, so if we're talking about animal units for people who aren't familiar, it's like a way of being able to standardize like how much animal you have out there on the land. And the unit is like one 1,000-pound cow is one animal unit.
Or one
1,000 pound
anything.
Whatever. And so the equivalent for sheep is 5 ewes basically will equal 1 cow. And so given that, you need a fifth, rough math, you need a fifth of the land area that you would need to run an equivalent amount of cattle, which is another sort of like lowers the barrier of entry, because people on smaller acreages can run a pretty decent amount of ewes, and it doesn't take many ewes to be making a decent either supplemental income or like full-time income, if you know how to market them. And anyway, we can get into that in a second, but yeah, they require less land because they don't eat quite as much. They're not as big, so they won't really hurt you that much. They also are cheaper, which is what, like, sort of just recapping what we've gone over.
They breed, or they reproduce very quickly compared to cattle.
Yep.
A ewe lamb that's born in the spring and it's taken a year around will be bred you can breed her in December, which is at like 7-8 months or something.
Yep.
And she will lamb the next spring at 1 year old.
So you're getting a return on that investment within
a year.
And for cattle, it's 2 years, if not 3 years, for that same return on investment. So, and the other advantage with sheep too is the first year you're probably just going to get 1 lamb out of that ewe, but every year after that, there's a very high likelihood that she's going to be giving you twins, double lambs.
Sometimes
every
even
year.
triplets.
Even triplets, although like sometimes triplets can be too much and one doesn't make it, but like it's not like with cattle where twins is a bad thing, because cattle have a really hard time being able to support 2 full-grown calves, or growing, I should say, calves. But with sheep, like they're it's totally good, like no problem at all. They'll raise the 2 of them, no problem. And so you end up, talk about multiplying your numbers and cash flow right off the bat. It's
triple
insane.
In the first year you could potentially triple your flock, and then in the second year,
Yep.
if you're doing the same offspring,
whatever that is. Each one of those has 3. It's exponential. It's exponential growth.
That's crazy.
It doesn't take very long, which means you don't need to buy that large of a starter herd or flock. Sorry, that's I'm gonna be flipping those terms constantly tonight.
It's kind of the same.
But if you start with a relatively small number of ewes, you can build numbers quick, where it takes years and years and years to do the same thing with cattle because of that 2-3 year time window, and they only have one calf every year. You're like cranking them out every year. Everybody's having twins. We averaged 1.8 lambs per ewe this year, which is
incredibly
really good. But even if you average 1.5, which is, if you got some mature ewes in there, that's pretty standard. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So that's a big advantage. But they don't come without their disadvantages.
Yep.
It's like everything. There's pros and cons to everything. I'd say one of the big ones is that sheep are an incredibly vulnerable animal. Everything likes to eat sheep, and so you're going to have to figure out some way of protecting them. And what we recommend is livestock guardian dogs. And if you really, really don't want to do that, or you can't do that, you can use electric netting. But netting on a full-size sheep operation is almost impossible. It is just a complete nightmare.
It is
a huge time sink to have to be moving netting all the time. Dogs, and so that sort of brings on another piece, which is that sheep are more difficult to break initially, probably to hot wire, than cattle would be.
We're talking
single strand. Like, there's very few people. Greg runs his sheep on a single strand of poly braid about 10 inches off the ground. And people have trouble keeping in sheep with netting. Like netting, and he's able to do it with one poly braid, and that's a testament to being able to train them in the beginning. And we'll get into that maybe at a different live stream. But it's one of those deals where, like, if they can become a huge headache if you don't properly break them to hot wire in the beginning, because they'll constantly be getting out. And if a single sheep gets out, it's not like a steer or a heifer or a bull or whatever that gets out, and you can just sort of get a little poly braid V around them, or just sort of like walk 2 people or 1 person and sort of walk it easily like back into the paddock. Like, sheep when they're by themselves are so difficult to get to go where you want them to go. They're just like spooky and like zipping around, like trying to figure out how to get back in with their buddies, and they can run at you like when you're trying to like get them to go where you want to go. But when they're as a group, they herd better than cattle do. Like on cattle drives and stuff like that, they're so terrified of being left alone that they like ball up.
They have a very, very high herd instinct.
Yep.
Or flock instinct.
But yeah, I would say they're like more finicky than cattle in a lot of ways, where you gotta it's gotta be like anything. This is sort of a theme, I guess, with the stuff that we talk about. But if it's something that is a passion of yours or gets you excited to deal with sheep, then they're super cool and fun to deal with. And we love dealing with them. They're awesome. But if you don't really like those like smaller, slightly more finicky, like ruminant animals, like goats and sheep is sort of what I'm talking about, they can be just an absolute like tear your hair out type deal. And a lot of that has to do with setting up the flock properly in the first place. But yeah, I mean, other than that, like, pretty low barrier to entry and pretty big upside. But you just have to set it up properly, sort of like everything. And we can get into that maybe this live stream, maybe not. But sort of the other thing that we wanted to talk about too with sheep is incorporating them into a system that's already using cattle, and what that looks like. So you know, what you wanna go off on some things with running sheep and cattle like together, like things to think about.
Yeah, sheep. So, like a flurd, which is a flock and a herd joined together. That's, I think, Greg kind of. I guess that's kind of. I think it's
sort of in
kind of a thing that's
in the space.
In the space, there are so many advantages to being able to run, you know, as one herd, flurd group of animals. You know, sheep and cattle, and even goats, if you could work it out that way, all as one. Not only. So the biggest one is like the rest period. On your farm, if you've got everything in the same herd, every other paddock on your farm is resting or recovering at that point. Whereas if you have two, like a herd and a flock, your herd is moving around the farm and the flock is moving around the farm at the same time, and so the recovery period from when one group the flock leaves the paddock to when the cattle come back, there's less of a recovery period. Whereas if they're all as one, you've got the longer recovery period. So that's a huge advantage.
Yep.
Another advantage is sheep and cattle do not share they're dead end hosts for each other's parasites. What that means is cattle parasites, as a sheep's walking around grazing, they pick up cattle parasites and it's a dead end host. So the parasites can't do anything and they die off. Same way with the cattle. The cattle pick up the sheep's parasites and they die off. And so it's a way of helping balance each other's parasite load and decreasing the parasite load in the pastures. Another advantage is sheep and cattle graze differently. They'll graze different species. They do graze the same species too, but they do have, like, sheep are more of a browser. They like more of the woody / like broadleaf species, whereas cattle are more grass and legumes. So that's another advantage. And another advantage is if you can, so with the predator protection thing, and this is just something that we've talked about, we don't know if
we don't do
not.
it here. But
we don't do it here, but I think it was Ian, Greg's South African friend, who talked to him about this, but he talked about, for predator protection with the sheep, if you turn them loose in your cattle, the ones that stay with the cattle are going to be protected. So every sheep that leaves and doesn't stay with the cattle is going to die off from predators or whatever, but the smart ones will stay with the cattle, and those are the ones you build your flock from. Well, does it work? It's going to cost you a lot of money in sheep, a lot of death
potentially
to get there, and it may not work. But that's another thing to think about, is that the cattle could offer some sort of predator protection, and they will. It's just not guaranteed, I don't think. But you could run dogs in the flurd too,
and we've done that.
Yeah, the dogs will get used to the cattle just like they get used to the sheep. It's just a process you got to go through to train them and get them used to it. Make
sure when you turn them all in, what would be ideal is if you're gonna merge, two animals, or anytime you're bringing a new group into an existing group, even if they're different species or the same species or whatever. If you can get them like in adjacent paddocks to each other, so they can sort of see each other, or maybe in a corral adjacent to a paddock or whatever, so they can interact but not be right on top of each other and get used to each other for a day or whatever, and then introduce them, they're gonna be a lot more comfortable than if you just plopped them right in the first place. But if you do just plop them right in the first place, which we've done, just make sure they have a big enough paddock, because the dogs might start chasing the cattle in the beginning just to like play with them a little bit, and then if you're there reprimanding the dogs, you can sort of put a stop to that pretty quickly, but you just don't want anything running through a fence. And the opposite, we've seen the opposite happen. We've seen a heifer calf chase off one of the guard dogs when she got into the paddock with the cattle, like just, tear-assing after that thing.
She took off running after.
She was booking, keeping up with me. That dog can run fast, and she was keeping up right on the butt of the dog the whole time. The dog's like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
Oh, that was so funny.
It was funny.
It happened, and then the dog lady came back, and it happened again. I think it happened like 2 or 3 times.
And it was only a 7-month-old calf.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a big heifer or something.
No.
It was just a little heifer calf.
Yeah, she probably was double the weight of the dog, still maybe triple.
Yeah, it's just funny.
It was so funny to watch. But another thing to sort of like keep in mind too, that people sometimes get into trouble with when they're combining flirts, or making a flirt or combining sheep with cattle, is they get this idea in their head, because they do eat slightly different forage. Like you were saying, the sheep prefer more of that browse material, more of that like broadleaf, like maybe stemmy, woody kind of stuff. That they think that, I can just add sheep into my cattle and they're going to eat different forage from the cattle, so I can still just keep my paddock sizes the same, and there'll just be a more uniform graze over everything in the paddock. And it doesn't really work like that, because
there's an element to it where they will eat different.
So
they're not going to take down. You could still add some sheep into your cow herd and not sacrifice cattle forage, but there's a limit, and it's hard. I don't know. It's hard. There's not like a definitive answer to that
because it depends on your environment.
It's so there's so many variables to it.
But like, just think of it this way: it's like if you add, say, you have like 150 ewes, and you add them into a group of like 150 cows. An animal unit, right, is 5 ewes per animal unit. If you added 150 ewes into the group, into the cow mob, that's effectively like adding 30 cows. And if you added 30 cows into your mob of 150 cows, you're going to notice a difference in the amount of forage that gets consumed. And so it's just something to keep in mind. Like, you should always be, like always, you should always be monitoring your residual and making adjustments to paddock sizes based on, like how much forage they're leaving behind and what your goals are. But yeah, sheep are more similar to cattle in the way that they graze than they are to goats, which I think people sometimes, like, I didn't really realize that until the grazing school when we were discussing that, where like goats will truly eat very different forage from everything else. Like, they'll go after stuff that sheep won't even go after. But because goats and sheep look similar, I think people sometimes conflate the two of them and think like, oh, like sheep's just like a hornless goat. But in reality, they're a lot more similar to they graze really similarly to cattle, and which is an advantage and a disadvantage depending on what you're thinking. But it's a great addition to a cattle operation for sure. But like anything, you gotta enjoy doing it because it's gonna take time.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to monkey with it a fair amount.
It'd be so cool. I'd love to run goats, sheep, and cattle all together. The problem is, goats can be kind of hard to keep in.
Like, if sheep are a little finicky to deal with, it's like goats are even farther down the spectrum of finicky.
Yeah.
But
if a goat gets wet and cold, she'll die.
Yeah.
Like a kid.
Yeah.
So they're
and
a lot.
Lambs are a little bit more hardy.
Yeah. Just a
than
little
kids.
bit. They're not like calves.
No.
But
even calves are vulnerable when they're freshly born, but still.
Yeah.
They're cool animals. They're super cool.
They are. They're so different than cattle. They're
so
similar,
different.
but they're so different.
Yep. I mean, if I was somewhere with like marginal land, like in the beginning, where you'd be like, man, like I might be able to put a couple Corrientes out here, but it's going to be a little bit like nip and tuck trying to figure out if I could feed a bunch of cows. I'd go full bore on sheep if that was a thing. The only thing also to consider with sheep is like if you're in an area where you have a ton of neighbors, and even if those neighbors have dogs, especially if they have dogs, even if they don't though, like the guard dog's job more than anything is to bark, and to bark all night long. And they will. And they're loud. And so you're gonna get so many complaints. Like if you have neighbors that complain about like your barking house dog, they're gonna be beating down your door if you're running sheep anywhere near them with dogs, because the dogs are gonna bark and bark and bark and bark. And then if they have neighborhood dogs, you can run into a whole different kind of problem where those guard dogs are trained to protect the sheep, and so if something comes in there and starts messing with the sheep, there's a pretty good chance that guard dog is gonna threaten and go after something that comes in there. So you just don't want to be killing anybody's neighborhood dogs. It's really not. It's not a good situation, and that limits us too, because we would love to run the sheep on all of the area that the cattle also graze. It'd be really a great addition to landscape reparation or regeneration or whatever, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
All those benefits we were talking about running cattle and sheep together. It'd be awesome if we could do it, but we have neighbors and neighbor dogs that are pretty close to where we run the cattle on certain parts of the farm, and so we just have to keep the sheep. We have to keep the sheep where they're at, because the farm that the sheep are on is on this road that nobody lives on, and so we can have a pack of 25 guard dogs in there and nobody has a problem.
32 now, 31.
So, yeah, it's nuts. I mean,
guard dogs are cool, but when you get a lot, it's a lot
more work. That's for sure.
The guard dogs right now, we're talking like personally, like here at Green Pastures Farm, they're probably more work than anything.
Yeah, than anything we do. More work than the sheep. More work than the cattle.
Right now, like in the winter.
When we're talking about like raising guard dog puppies and training them. Like
we've got 4 different litters that we're in the process of training all at the same time.
Yep. So it's nuts. Yeah. I mean, like the wheels haven't fallen off yet, which is pretty cool. But like it just feels like it's
Yeah,
barely holding together.
Yeah, the
Um,
bolts are starting to
rattle loose a little
bit.
Oh man.
Uh,
But hey, I mean, it's fun. It's fun.
it
to,
is.
like,
It's
have
good to
fun
learn
there.
too.
Yeah.
Like we're learning a lot
Yeah.
just about it,
Yeah.
and puppies are always fun to play with.
Yeah.
They can just be a handful at times.
Yeah. I think it's probably a good discussion about the sheep. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a whole we're gonna go in deep.
I think we got some good questions about it. Too.
We're gonna go in deep in maybe in some of these questions, but in future live streams about like nitty gritty, like how to start a sheep flock and how to train sheep and how to manage a sheep flock. Like that's gonna be a totally different discussion. We're like this sort of one is just like general things to think about, things starting, like just things maybe to be aware of, and that's sort of what we wanted to cover today. But that nitty gritty stuff, we'll get there. Don't worry, we'll get there. Maybe we'll get there tonight. So, I mean, people start asking questions if you want some specifics. But yeah, stay tuned for future Chewing the Cud episodes. What we got?
For those who've emailed Jan and Greg, is there a best time to call them about guard dogs? So Jan's usually home during the day. She's hit or miss as to whether she'll answer the phone, just because sometimes she's outside.
She's busy,
but
yeah.
in this cold temperature, she's been inside. But during
she's
the day
she's
or
in
evenings.
Jan's in charge of the dogs.
Yep. Just call the home phone. I think it's on the website, or call Greg's cell. Any of them.
Unfortunately, though, I'm fairly confident that all of the guard dogs are sold.
Yep. So if you haven't already,
if you haven't already spoken for one, you're probably just gonna have to get on the wait list.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we might have. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't know for sure when the next litter's gonna come. Probably late. Sheila will have
puppies in 6 months or whatever.
We got so many dogs.
We need to sell some dogs. We need to actually get dogs off the farm before we get more dogs on the farm.
Oh man.
Yeah.
But yeah, give them a call during the day or in the evening, whatever.
If in general, if you're trying to get a hold of Greg for livestock stuff, I would say during the day is kind of tricky because he's usually out with us.
Yeah.
So I'd say weekends are a good time to call probably because evenings.
Like, not super late.
Not super late because he goes to bed, but like like after work. It's like whenever you would end work, you know what I mean? Like somewhere in that neighborhood, he'll probably be more likely to answer the phone. And weekends, he'll be more likely to answer the phone just because he's usually just like pittering around doing stuff like close to like either on the farm somewhere at his house or like around here. So. During the week is tricky though because we're going pretty much most of the week.
When it's not cold.
When it's not cold now. Yeah, he's been able to answer the phone a lot more recently because we've been inside a lot more. But yeah.
So even with netting, it's not a definite against hungry coyotes. Yeah.
It's definitely not. If I was raising sheep, I would not do it without dogs.
Yeah.
There's no way. Even if A, netting's a huge pain, but B, it's like whoever this was saying, it's not a guarantee. Like if a coyote gets hungry enough, it's gonna figure out a way to get in there. So yeah.
Heavenly Natural Products said, guys, you should use 2 phones and run live on YouTube as well. While the audience is thin now, I guarantee you it will grow. Yeah,
I mean that's the point. Slow and steady. I've thought about like simul streaming, which is a little more. I've looked into it a little bit, but it's more. There's a couple things. One, we have very limited cell phone signal, and
we don't have Wi-Fi.
We don't have Wi-Fi up here, so that's like what we're doing this off of, and that's why if this
my phone's reading the comments and his
and mine's doing the stream, but if it is choppy, that's the reason why. And so, I don't know. For now, this is the best way to do it. If we end up getting internet, like we can get a computer involved, and then the world's our oyster.
Then it's limitless.
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. So you just have to see them after the fact. I agree, though. It'd be kind of cool to go live on YouTube at the same time.
And go live in Clubhouse too. Lots of people are interested in this stuff.
Yeah, Clubhouse. That's like a new thing.
I'm super familiar with that.
It's a new thing.
Does the same apply to goats? I don't remember what we were saying when.
Well, I mean, goats as far as like some of the sheep stuff we were talking about.
Something we were talking about.
Probably. Like some of it's applicable.
Yeah.
Some of it's not.
Yeah.
We don't have direct experience raising goats because I have very limited experience. Like on one of the farms I worked at previously when I was really, I mean, I was like 15, 16. We raised goats, but we didn't graze them or anything. They were just like in a barn or like out in a paddock, like adjacent to the barn.
I had a milk goat one time.
Yeah, that's what we did. We milked the goats.
I had a milk goat, but we didn't milk it because it was dry.
Yeah.
But we tied it to a post. I think I
Yeah.
We tied it to a post one time to let it graze. And we left it, and it freaked out. And we just look, and here goes the goat running across the yard, dragging, big old post that had rotted off to the ground.
Yeah, goats are funny. Like they're funny little
we gave
things
it to an
deal
Amish
with.
friend.
It's just from Greg used to run them actually, like years ago, way before we got here. And he said it was just an absolute nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And
couldn't keep him on the farm.
Could not keep him in. So he was like, I'm done with goats. I can't deal with it anymore. So.
Yep.
That's the story with that.
George Heller.
How's it going, George?
How's it going, George? How about separating the bulls and rams when it is time to keep them from breeding when you run a flirt? Like where to put them and whether or not they need to be grouped with other animals for social. So that's a good
question.
One. So with the bulls, we'll just go into it. We take the bulls out March 1st from the cow mob. All the bulls come out, steers, heifers, everything else stays in. They're out until grass grows. We keep them separated, feeding them hay, and if we have some stockpile in the area, we'll feed them some stockpile. Once we start getting grass, that's when we'll either haul them or walk them to the sheep, and that's when we'll create the flurd.
With the bulls.
With the bulls.
And the sheep.
Mm-hmm. And then the bulls will stay in with the sheep until the sheep start lambing, and then the sheep can't keep up with the bulls' needs. The bulls need to move quicker than the sheep can keep up with, so that's when they kind of separate. And then once the lambs kind of get their feet under them,
which does
get
not
going
take
again.
very long.
No, it's a couple weeks, maybe a month max. That's when we stick the bulls back in with the sheep until July 1st when we put the bulls in with the cow mob.
So to recap, bulls go out March 1st and then go back in July. That's the important
thing. And then they're staying
in
until the next March 1st.
Yep.
Rams. So the rams, we put the rams in December 1st. They're in with the sheep. They get them bred within like 2 weeks, 3 weeks max, and then we just leave them in all winter long with the sheep until they lamb, and then the sheep are not like cattle. Sheep won't come into heat for a couple cycles just because they're recovering and recouping. But by I think it's the end of July, or like mid-July, when we'll get the whole flock up, we'll separate out ram lambs and ewe lambs
to get a count for selling sheep that summer,
and then we will castrate any ram lambs that are not ram quality, and then everything that's castrated gets put back in with the sheep. And then we take the ram lambs out.
With the big rams, we usually keep a couple big rams in there too.
Yeah, we take them out, and they stay in, we call it like the bachelor pad.
The bachelor pad.
It's like a silvopasture area.
It's close to the house.
Yeah, and we don't have guard dogs with them, but the house dogs roam around here and they keep the coyotes at bay.
And 3 of the 4 house dogs were former guard dogs, so it's kind of like having guard dogs in the area.
Yeah, kind of.
But
so they stay out there until December 1st, obviously.
And then they go back in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the things to think about, though, as far as, like, socialization and separating stuff, like, nobody likes to be left alone.
Yeah.
Like, on either end, the bulls or the sheep. And so, the bulls or the rams, I should say. And so, like, if you only have one bull or one ram, which I wouldn't really recommend anyway, because, like, redundancies are always a good thing to have. But they at least need one buddy. So, like, a wither or a steer or something to, like, hang out with, because it's like if they're by themselves, they can just get into trouble. They're herd animals, flock animals, whatever you want to say. So they just do so much better when they have something else to interact with.
For your scenario, George, if you've got 2, let's say you got 1 or 2 rams, I can't remember. I think you bought 2. If you've looked at, I don't know if you've looked into the Rammobile that Greg's talked about. He's talked about it in videos. He's talked about it to some people.
Yep.
It's basically a 16 by 16 foot portable contraption. It's 4 cattle panels in a square, and then there's welded, steel pipe as the frame, and then there's caster wheels on the bottom, so you can just push it, kind of like a big shopping cart, but there's
upside down
open floor.
Yeah, it's like an upside down shopping cart with wheels on the
It's
bottom.
like a chicken tractor, but for rams.
Yeah.
And in that scenario, if you wanted to keep the rams in the flock, so they couldn't get out, they couldn't breed, but they still feel like they're part of the flock.
You could do that.
You could do that for
it
sure.
Just requires pushing it around.
Yeah, which.
Yeah.
That's not super heavy.
Yeah.
That's something you can do. But.
Yeah, and they like the rams cannot get out of that, and predators cannot get in it either. So if you did,
you could even put it in your yard and push it around as a lawnmower.
Yeah.
And then the predators are not going to come close to your house, and you don't have to worry about that either.
But and then obviously he's taking them out because we know George personally, so like we know that he's in Minnesota, so it's like his timing as far as taking stuff out and putting stuff back in, like your timing is going to be a little bit different from ours.
You want to be calving and lambing when that spring grass is really cranking.
Yep. And you don't want to do it in the winter.
Preferably lambing when it's even a little bit later than calving, because the lambs really need it to be warm, because wet and cold just kills lambs like crazy.
Yep.
So if you can, just time everything around that. I think sheep's gestation is like
5 months.
5 months, something like that. We could look it up and
someone's
get you the
going to correct us if we're wrong.
Find out the sheep's gestation, and then they will. You want to separate them out within I think it's 3 months after they lamb, or maybe a little before 2 months maybe.
The really what you got to worry about also is the ram lambs getting old enough to get the job done too, because
we separated out the ram lambs when they with the big rams.
With the big rams, but that's something to keep in mind. Like, just because they look little, because they won't look like a full grown ram. Just because they look little, doesn't mean that they might not be able to breed something, because you turn around one day and then you turn back around the next day and the thing's got a set of nuts like this big, and so you just have to be careful, because that little guy could just go to town, and then you're gonna be lambing in the middle of February and everything dies.
The thing about sheep and ewes are once one starts to kind of come into heat, and they need that ram to trigger them to come into heat. Once they smell the ram, then one of them starts to come into heat, and then the other one starts to come into heat, and they all come into heat within boom 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 within 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so if you've got a ram lamb in there,
he's gonna to town.
He's gonna have a lot of lady friends.
Yeah.
So just be careful.
Yeah, just be careful.
The worst thing you can do is having to lamb in December, because you didn't take your rams out young enough, or
God, that'd be terrible.
soon enough. But
they just be dying all over the place.
Yeah, you'd have to get them into a barn.
Yeah, there's no
You
way.
just can't lamb in the snow.
No, or even just in even if it doesn't snow, even if it's just cold and wet, around anywhere in the neighborhood of freezing and wet, same problem. So.
So Greg is selling livestock guardian dogs. What are you guys recommending for people that take those pups home, keep them in the paddock, but in electric net, keep everyone in the corral for a while? So electric netting, they're broke to electric netting.
Yeah.
If you wanted to keep them into the corral to kind of get them used to the sheep,
that's probably
that too. But I think the electric netting is going to do the same as the corral.
They'll be happier probably on pasture.
Yeah.
From the get. But the other thing to make the distinction is that the dogs that we're selling are in 2 groups. One of which are 6-month-old, roughly puppies, which are not fully trained guard dogs, but they're they're obviously not the price of a fully trained guard dog, because we have basically a year's worth of training into that dog. But the one that's fully trained is gonna there's gonna be a lot less work on your part, trying to make sure that it doesn't mess around with the sheep or stay in the paddock or whatever. But
it's even after the 1 year, they're still gonna be growing, and you have to keep
until they're about 2-3 years old. That's when they've sort of start to fully mature out. So you got to be on the lookout. But basically, once you get to that year mark, you're sort of out of the woods.
You're kind of past the juvenile stage where they can really cause trouble.
For the most part, they're going to be okay. And then 2-3 years plus, if you're good, if they haven't gone after sheep by the time they're 2 or 3 years old, you should be totally good for the rest of that dog's life. But yeah, I would say make sure you have them in netting when they first get there, just so the dog understands like
This is home.
This is home, and these are my sheep.
And make sure he's eating.
Yep.
And
drinking water
before you let him go.
Yeah, and we'd also recommend, like, our dogs are really used to feeding out of a sheep-proof gravity flow dog feeder that we built. And so if you DM me if you have any questions, or email Greg or whatever, but I could probably get back to you faster than Greg can, or DM Isaac, same deal. And we can give you specifications about like sort of what that looks like. But essentially it's just like hog panels or even cattle panels that prevent the sheep from like eating the dog food, because they will eat the dog food if they have access to it.
Once you get a sheep trained eating dog food, they won't eat it. They'll just eat it and eat it and eat it.
And dog food is expensive compared to grass. And so basically all it is just like a cage with a little slot that the dog can slip underneath and then get up into the cage where the gravity flow feeder is, and they can eat as much as they want. And so, that's the solution. So if you get something similar to that built, and you keep them in netting when they first get there, so
and get them used to you. Before you let them go. The ones that we're training right now, they're really friendly. They love a good pet.
Yep.
There's been some in the past that Greg's been a lot harder to pet, but once they're even like our older dogs, Big Boy and Lady, they love a good pet every once in a while.
But and really, like, when it comes to dogs, the thing to also remember is that they're not pets.
Yeah.
And that's one of the hardest things to get through to people sometimes, is the fact that like your frame of mind, because your experience with dogs in the past has been house dogs, and so like that's
you just love it.
Yeah, you just love them and you love petting them, and they'll love it. And the dogs that we raise, most of them will love getting a pet or whatever. But you can ruin a dog very fast, especially if it's one of those 6 month old dogs. By petting them too much, they follow you back to the truck. You don't reprimand them, and the next thing you know, you have a house dog instead of a guard dog, and your sheep start dying. So they have a job to do, and they love doing that job. And so if you can, when you're in the paddock, you can, give them a good pet or whatever.
You can give them attention.
As much as you want, but like when you go to leave the paddock, you need to make sure that they understand that like you leaving means that's the boundary. Like, we're done. You're not following me back. And so our solution is you have like basically just a stick with a little trash bag that's like taped to the end of it, and just whack that thing on the ground, not at the dog, but on the ground. And it just sort of freaks them out, and it like snaps them out of whatever they're doing.
Especially if you're getting one of Greg's dogs, they'll
trained to that.
They'll be broke to that. We bring that thing with us every time we go to the sheep.
The puppy whipper, which is not for whipping puppies, but it's for whipping the ground. You're not supposed to really hit dogs, because then they won't trust you anymore, and it's really difficult to deal with them at that point.
Yep. I think it's Ventura Brush Company. They are in California and running sheep and goats primarily for fire management.
Yep.
That's super cool.
Yeah, I've heard some stories about people trying to do that. If you can get a scenario where that works and you've got the clientele for it, like, power to you. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things where, like, you just need.
It's a certain situation.
Certain situation where it'll work. You just need the demand to make it work. Yeah.
What would you do without those older guardian dogs to help out training puppies? You can train a puppy. The guard dogs definitely do a lot of the training, but a lot of it is on us too.
Yeah.
And just the dogs will learn just being with the sheep.
They're bred to do that.
Yeah.
Like, they're like the mix of breeds that we have, like Marima, Anatolian Shepherd, Great Pyrenees. Although a pureblood Great Pyrenees is not the greatest idea.
It's a 3-way cross between.
Yeah. But like all those breeds in and of themselves are Akbash. All those breeds in and of themselves are bred to a certain extent to be guard dogs, to be livestock guardian dogs, and so that's like in their DNA to want to do that. So if you can just give them the environment where they can start to express some of that like innate ability, and then just give them boundaries, like reprimand them for doing things they're not supposed to do, and praise them if they're doing a good job and whatever, then like they'll figure it out. You know?
They're pretty smart. It just takes patience on your part.
Yep. Yeah, that's really all it is patience and just being on top of it.
All right. I'd be very interested how you would start if you were going to do the livestock guardian dogs. Would you do just like Greg is, or would you do differently or / smaller?
Like raising them? Are they saying raising them for?
I think like starting out, like breeding or training puppies. I think.
Like to sell them.
Yeah, I think it's a good.
It's a good way to make some more
I
money.
would personally prefer to buy a litter as opposed to whelp a litter.
Yeah, so there's two ways that you could go about it, which is what you're referring to. One is you have a breeding female and you have male dogs, and so you're raising your own puppies and whelping that. That whelping is like calving for dogs. Like that female's giving birth on your farm and you're raising those puppies up and selling them. That's one way. And the other way is you have somebody else who has a dog that gives birth, and you say, I'm going to buy all of your weaned puppies from you. And you get 6, 7 puppies or whatever when they're weaned off of their mother, and then you train them from 7 months old, or
Not
7 months, 7
like
weeks.
7 weeks, 16 weeks.
4 months. No. When was it? They were
They
born in
weren't-
August.
August, and we got them in like October, September. So
September.
like
Yeah, like 7. I don't
7
know.
weeks. 7 weeks.
Anyway,
Yeah,
whenever
it's
you
7
wean,
weeks.
whenever you wean dogs, because it's
Yeah.
7 months for cattle.
Yeah.
Whenever
I think
you,
it's 5 to 7 weeks. Or something.
yeah, or something like that. Whenever the puppies are weaned,
Mm-hmm.
you take them and then you train them at that point. And that, I mean, you can talk about it. That it just excludes a whole lot of headache.
Yeah, they're just like there's a lot of risk that goes into whelping, whelping is the process of having
calving
pups.
for calving pups.
Yeah, calving pups. Like you're putting your female at risk because there's a lot of like things that can go wrong with a birth, and then when you factor in there might be 8 puppies, or 10, like there could be a lot that goes wrong in the time of getting them from being born to like weaned, and then so if you can buy them weaned and take them from being weaned up to full grown livestock guardian dogs, there's a lot less risk on your part.
Not to mention, like, when the female comes into heat, we've noticed that every time that happens, the female will leave the paddock, like leave the sheep, just try to like
roaming.
like roaming around like away from like the male dogs. And the male dogs will chase her, and so you'll have a period of a couple days where you might not have consistent guard dogs in with your sheep, and you could start losing sheep in theory when that starts to happen, or the dogs could get hit if they're on a busy road or something like that. So like not only like the whelping piece, but just the whole act of like coming into heat and like the dogs breeding, like that can cause some issues as well. So if your dogs are fixed, or if your females are spayed, I should say, like that sort of mitigates a lot of those problems.
I think if you have, and Greg is in this situation where you've got a really good female that stays in the paddock, like Sheila.
Yeah.
She had an excellent litter of pups.
And
she did an awesome job with them.
Yep.
I think in that scenario, I might try to whelp with like that dog. But I'd fix, like with Lady, which is our big dog, we're going to get her fixed.
Yeah.
And I'd fix all the others just because one dog is complicated enough.
Yeah, dealing with multiple is difficult.
Yeah.
But like that's our opinion.
Yeah,
Like,
if that's something you guys want to do.
I think they have. I think you guys had puppies. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you did.
I think so.
I thought I saw that
Yeah.
on a story a little while back. But yeah.
So yeah, if that's something you want to do, I mean, go for it. It's a lot of fun.
It's so much fun. Yeah. It is.
If you're into that, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's like it's awesome, but
Yeah.
it's just a lot of different things that can go wrong, just like anything.
Yeah, exactly. So, do what you love. It seems to be a theme of this. Is stick to that, and you're gonna be pretty okay.
Is higher probability of getting twins in cattle an inferior genetic trait, or is it just coincidental? A lot of people, I would say, commodity or like normal
Your,
a lot of people
your run of the mill like cattle operation
likes twins. They you know, they think that's a good
competitive advantage.
And if you think about it, yes, it's two head that you're getting for the same cow. The problem is she's not going to be able to raise two stud calves. You know,
both
of them are going to be kind of not stunted, but they're not gonna reach their peak performance like maybe a cow that calves and has just an absolute stud of a bull. You know, she could give that bull everything he needs to be, you know, premium or superior.
If she has 100% nutrition to like give to her calf, and she has two calves, doesn't really work out like this, but like you're gonna get 50% in each one. So you're gonna get like mediocre calves versus like one calf getting all of that, like nutrients, all that attention. But I mean, like, not saying that it can't happen. It's just the amount of complications that it brings up, especially in our kind of system, which is as much like let the animals do the work, let the animals like perform in do what they do best type thing. Like, you don't want to be intervening, and usually if you're having twins, it's going to require a significant amount of intervention to make sure everything goes okay, from the act of calving all the way through to like raising those calves. So we would prefer, and Greg has expressed too, would much prefer to just have singles, not twins. So yeah, but with sheep, it's awesome. You want twins with sheep for sure.
100%.
Yeah, triplets even are okay for sure. Like
quadruplets are way too much.
Quadruplets? I don't think we had any quadruplets.
Not this year. Greg has though in the past.
Yeah, it's a task for them to raise 3, and they can do it sometimes, but sometimes they can't.
George says, I was talking about if you're running a flirt all the time. I'd say you just take out when they need to be taken out.
Yep.
Put them back in when they need to be put back in, and make sure you have a buddy with them. If you take out a bull, if you got a steer with them or in your herd, take him out, run him with the bull. It would
be also better. It'd be better if you had a steer or some other like bovine with him. But in theory, you could have like a ram and a bull together. And the fact that there's something else there it won't be as good, but they'll be like buddies.
Yeah,
so,
you could have the bro game.
Yeah, it'd be like that would be so funny. Oh, you have your bulls and your rams together. That'd
George,
be a serious
if you do that, you better
post some videos about that.
Cool.
That'd be funny.
He said, no winter lambing with an exclamation point.
Yeah, no winter lambing. I can't even imagine.
Oh,
we're getting Minnesota weather here right now.
Yeah, probably not quite even.
No, but like we're getting like average Minnesota weather down here, and it's like the worst in 20 years.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Us Northerners brought the cold weather down to Missouri this winter.
Yeah, we need Connor to come here and bring his like
back from
Tennessee like southern like warmth into the whole deal.
Wouldn't that be funny?
Yeah, if next year we have like a mild winter because we've got
warm.
Yeah, super warm.
This is how winter always is.
It's always just like, dude.
You don't understand.
You don't understand.
The
joys of the Arctic tundra.
Yeah. All right, Keeling Farm says, if you have one dog, would you hand feed? Would hand feeding be just as easy, and how would you go about it? Yeah, you can hand feed, not dog food. I would hand feed meat scraps if I was gonna hand feed. But I would say just as easy. No, it'd be.
I would say that I think it's gonna be it's gonna be difficult to. So okay, let me unpack this a little bit for like what I'm thinking. I get where you're coming from too, where hand feeding them, like the dog's really gonna know you, and you don't have to worry about the sheep like eating the dog food. Like if you're thinking of hand feeding them kibble, because if you throw a pile of meat scraps out there, the sheep aren't gonna eat the meat scraps, which is like an advantage of that. But the disadvantage is like kibble. If you're buying a good quality kibble, like has all of the like vitamins and minerals and nutrients and stuff for like the dog to be healthy, it's kind of difficult to be able to meet all of the nutrition requirements of the dog like just by feeding it raw meat. I'm not saying it can't be done. It's just a little bit. It's a little trickier to be able to do it. So like if it was me, like the nutrition part is one thing that's a little difficult if you're gonna feed them meat scraps by hand. But the other piece to it also is like the fact that the dog has access to unlimited kibble means that like you don't want them to be hungry, because if they do get hungry, that's when they might think about gnawing on a sheep tail or gnawing on a sheep's ear or something like that. And a little bit of nibble here, a little bite there is going to turn into killing a sheep in a couple weeks. And so if you have a gravity flow feeder out there, it's going to guarantee that the dog is getting all the food that it possibly could want. And so they're just going to be happy to do their job, and they won't feel the need to go nibbling on something they shouldn't.
Yeah, and you could say, well, you just give them a ton of meat scraps.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is they're going to go and they're going to bury
what they can't eat at once.
Whatever percent of those meat scraps, and you're thinking, oh man, he's eating it. I'll keep dumping it to him. When really you're just wasting the extra meat scraps. And so I would say for no harder than it is to build.
Expensive.
We literally took 2 hog panels, cut them, whatever 64 inches or whatever we cut them. Cut 2 sections of it, made some runners, bolted them or screwed them together, put a couple cross pieces on it, hooked the wires together, nailed them or stapled them to the boards, and you were done.
Yeah.
Hook the dog feeder.
And the dog feeder doesn't cost that much either. Like the gravity flow thing, it's
the dog feeder is going to be your most expensive part.
Yeah. So
and that's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's just the way to go. I think that's just the way to go for sure. But anyway, that's our opinion.
And that's just gonna, not only is they're never gonna be hungry, but they're gonna get all they need to eat, and so they're gonna be at peak performance all the time. And
that's what you want. Like they do an incredible service for you, being out there and living there with the sheep all the time. And so it's on you to make sure that they get everything they want and they need to eat. You don't want to skimp. Don't want to skimp your dogs. That's for sure. I mean, you don't want to be pouring, especially in the summertime, you don't want to be pouring so much feed in there that it goes stale. Like, that's something to think about. But, like...
So if you got one dog, maybe just fill it halfway or something.
And with our dogs, like, when we only had a normal amount, in the summertime, we'd wait until they ate it down, towards the bottom quarter of the feeder, and then we would top it back off again. So they were getting, like, fresh feed in that feeder, and it didn't go stale. In the wintertime, if it's cold, you don't have to worry about it. Like, it's like keeping it in the fridge. So or the freezer. Deep freezer.
The deep freeze.
So yeah.
Do you know any seed stock producers near eastern Iowa that Greg would recommend? Seed stock for cattle or sheep?
That's a good question.
Eastern Iowa, that's not too far from here.
Yeah,
that's...
We've had people drive a lot farther to get stock.
Yeah.
Not that we have that much of it, but...
those, which were pretty much sold out, but those heifers and steers that Greg put on his YouTube, those are in northern Missouri, so that's
not too far from Iowa.
Next year, he'll probably have some more to sell.
Yeah.
So keep your ears.
And if Greg ever, a hot tip, if Greg ever puts out a video that says, we have this livestock for sale in July, and it's like January, or we have this livestock for sale in June, and it's January or February when the video comes out,
you better
email him like they're going out of style, because like
if you're interested,
because it is crazy being on the back end of it, how fast people jump on it, and we'll have that stuff sold in a matter of weeks from the if not days from the time, or hours sometimes, from the time the video comes out.
Greg put up a video of 40 heifers or something for sale,
and sold in 5 hours.
Sold out in 5 hours. So after he posted after the video went live, in 5 hours he was sold out. So like,
because some people have like from the emails that we've gotten, some people aren't aware of the fact that like we're basically done with the sale. Like, they just think that they're available because we got on it so early. But just think, like, whenever they come out, if you really want to get something and Greg makes an announcement like that, just jump on it like they're gonna they're gonna be sold tomorrow. It's just a tip for the chewing the cud gang,
George says supposed to be 38 above next weekend.
38
it's supposed
above.
to be 39 above here. We're just getting Minnesota weather.
39 above. We might get into we might crack 50 beginning of
next week.
Not this week, not this coming week, but next week.
Today's Sunday.
Yeah. So a week from tomorrow, maybe.
He says the dog feeders work slick as a whistle. That's right. Yeah. You should see I don't know if Greg's posted a video of. We call it the Ark. We've actually.
I think there is a video.
We've actually built 2 of them. They are behemoths.
Monster
They're like
dog feeders,
12-foot long.
Only necessary for
4 foot
production dog feeding.
And they got entrances on both ends. They got double feeders in the center.
Like,
I mean, they are.
We have like
thick chain on each end.
You can pull it either direction.
Yeah.
I mean, we have like 300 pounds of dog food capacity basically. So just to put that in perspective,
That's a lot of.
a lot of dog food. Yeah.
Cattle. He was talking about cattle. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled, ears peeled.
Yep.
Anything peeled.
Yep.
For Greg's talking about.
Yep.
And he's also, we're sitting tight on the bulls, too. He's almost sold out of bulls this year.
From our stock.
We're stopping until we know an accurate count of how many we have.
Which we will
left.
know March 1st. We will get an accurate count.
Yeah. So,
Because we're taking out the bulls March 1st. So, yeah, stay tuned for that.
Yep.
But for now, there's a pause on bull sales until we figure out how many we've got. So,
wondering if we should. This is Keeling Farms. Wondering if we should enclose our future dog in our mobile sheep barn at night with the sheep, or should we leave the dog in the paddock to roam around it and bark? I would say you leave it out.
yeah, the mobile. Yeah, you want it roaming around to bark.
Mm-hmm.
Also, mobile sheep barn.
The thing they've got the trailer frame.
Yeah.
And that's what their sheep are. They're gonna move it with their sheep. I think I haven't seen you guys were talking about it a long time ago. I haven't seen a ton of updates. You guys should give us an update on your
Yeah, make a post
mobile.
about it.
I remember you were using
Because, like,
fiberglass posts.
But my question is like, what's the point of the sheep shelter?
I think is that where the sheep are you like moving them in that, or is that where they're staying at night? I don't remember.
Because if you have a dog, you shouldn't need like protection for the sheep. You know what I mean? So like that's I'm just trying to figure out the purpose of the barn. But yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think they're staying in it.
But obviously, like if your dog is too young, to like protect
yeah.
the sheep. I mean, like, yeah, I would leave it outside.
I would leave
to
it
bark
outside.
because like when we raised the puppies, like when they were really young, they have a
just using it at night.
yeah, they have a
They have coyotes everywhere.
They had a shelter. The puppies had a shelter when they were really little to keep them out of the rain and the cold and the wind and whatnot. And they would barely use that during the day. Like when they got to a certain age, they just wouldn't. They would sleep in a big pile like outside next to the shelter. They wouldn't go in it. And so like, it's just one of those deals where like they're just happier for the most part to be outside, rather than being inside. So,
yeah.
But once the dog gets big enough,
even in the cold too, it's like
it is crazy. Like it's insane. Like if you were to able to Photoshop, like the scenery, so like you couldn't tell that it was snowy and cold out, and you were just looking at the demeanor of the dogs, like you would think it was probably 50, 60 degrees out, and it's like negative 25.
And they're like, oh,
and,
this is the best.
And it's not like they're just being happy and playing because that's what they're just trying to like pretend that they're like please you, but they're actually kind of cold. Like they're straight up not shivering at all, rolling around in the snow. They're sitting there, laying down.
It'll be wet and cold, and they're still fine.
Yeah,
it's like,
I have yet to see a dog uncomfortable. It's crazy.
They're more uncomfortable in the heat than they are in the freezing cold. Which part of that's because of their hair coat, but still.
It's crazy. They're just so
tough.
They're so tough.
How about dogs that have never been around lambing? This will be our very first time lambing. Yeah, that's another one. You really got to be on your toes. And we're going to have most of these puppies when lambing season hits. So what we're kind of throwing in the air is we might kick all the pups into some netting with the rams for whatever 2-3 weeks to let the lambs get up a little bit of size. Because during lambing, there's blood from afterbirth. There's new little creatures. They follow anything that's around.
They're so little too. Like when a lamb is born, if nobody's been around them, like I could hold one in the palm of my hand. Like that's how small they are.
Tiny. It's crazy.
Yeah, but they're after like within a week of being born, they're impossible to catch.
Mm-hmm.
So like you just need that little bit of period of time for them to get their feet under them and be a little more not quite as fragile. And then we turn the dogs back in. We're not totally sure with that yet, but like it's really more like you were suggesting. It could become a huge wreck during lambing season. It's the trickiest time to have dogs is during lambing season.
If you've got 1 dog, 2 dogs, something that's manageable, like last spring, we left all the dogs in there, and there was a couple of the dogs. They were kind of smelling on that afterbirth, and we would watch them, and they weren't harassing the sheep, and so we just make sure you stay on them, make sure they're not gonna harm the sheep. So yeah, I mean,
and if you
I'd say leave them in.
If you get an old ewe that like she's been around the block, she'll just go after the dogs if they come too close. Boom. Just crack them, and the dogs are like, "What the hell is going on?" And so they get the message really quickly once they get knocked a couple times by one of those older ewes. It's those younger ewes that are maybe first, second time mothers or whatever.
No clue what's going on.
They're just like, "Da-da-da. Oh, there's a dog, I'm gonna run away." And then they're like lambs have no idea what they're doing and they're just hanging out, and the dog's like sniffing around on them. They start to run, and the dog starts to run, and the dog tries to tackle and play with the sheep or the lamb, and then the lamb dies. Like they're that fragile when they're first born. So
and the dogs aren't meaning to be predators.
No, for the most part.
They're just friendly.
Like
they're curious and they're playful. Especially puppies. Puppies are the worst. And
so yeah, I mean, maybe you just have to spend more time, like sitting on a, because you don't want to be in with the sheep during lambing season, but you need to just be a lot more vigilant of the dogs during lambing season. So if you could sit on a hill or nearby or whatever, not in with the sheep, and just sort of monitor the dogs a little bit more, that might not be a bad idea.
Maybe for a day in the middle of heavy lambing season, you put some shock collars on your dogs and you sit there, and if they act up, you really shock them, and like that might be
the only
way to curb it.
The only thing with the shock collars is that you can't just shock them for like 5 minutes while you're in there moving the sheep. Because
you gotta sit there.
It's an inconsistent message. Like the important part is like if you're gonna break them like that, you every time they go after a sheep or do something wrong, it has to be consistent for that to work. So something to keep in mind. We don't use shock collars. It's just something that like
thought
about.
Is the sheep barn like a laminator with cattle panels on wheels for grazing, or just a day/night shelter with the sheep enclosed at night? I think
that's a question for a Keeling Farm.
You should go over and she's saying Keeling Farm says we'll do an update this week for us.
Yeah, awesome. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned, everybody. George says he'll be a month behind us, so he can watch us first.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
Flying Mule from California has a lot of information on research they've been doing on guardian dog tracking with GPS and watching them interact during lambing, etc. Oh, that's interesting.
Cool.
That'd be something.
Yeah.
Definitely something to look into.
Yeah.
It's the whole like that like makes me think of like when we're talking about calving, like if we could stick a GPS collar on the calves when we can't find them.
Yeah, this will be the last thing we talk about because I think we're roughly about an hour in.
Yeah.
But so like we've talked about in the past, the biggest time sink that we deal with in the spring, I would say period, is searching for calves, because there are certain situations where we have to make a road drive, or we have to go across a road, or we have to put up a back fence for some reason because we're preparing to go on a long cattle drive or something, and we need to get every mother and every calf in the same paddock. And when a calf goes and lays down, or the mother hides it or stashes it somewhere, they're so difficult to find, like incredibly difficult. You have to basically like step on them to be able to see them.
They just sit their head real
and
low
they will
lay
not
down,
move.
and they just disappear into the brush.
It's like a deer.
Yeah, it's like a fawn, really. Especially the red color.
Yeah.
It's like
so well camouflaged, which is good for the most part because predators don't see them, but it's such a nightmare because then like we spend literally hours and hours looking for calves in order to like match them up with their mothers, and we've learned a couple tricks from last year.
Yep.
Like the mother is way better at finding the calf than you and I are, and so you leave if you have the opportunity to leave the mother so she has access to go back to where that calf is. Like, so if it's if you know it's in one paddock because you saw it in that paddock and you need to move to the next one, don't put a back fence in, or at least leave a gate open so the mother has the ability to go back.
Yeah.
And she'll go back and get the calf up and bring it 90% of the time. She'll keep the calf with the mob, but just keep it hidden around the edges. But
if you have to go on a drive where you can't leave a back fence, that's when you got to sort the mother off, leave her in the old paddock, and move on.
With the
and
mob.
Then the next morning or next evening, when you come
back.
She's probably gonna have it with her, and then you can keep her.
It's
get her
usually
caught up.
early mornings is the best opportunity.
Usually
to find
evenings
them.
they won't have them, and early mornings they'll have them.
Yeah.
So it's like. It's like a seesaw.
If you can make, that's why if you can make drives in the morning early, like if you need to make a paddock change or a drive where you have to have everybody, that's when your best chance of getting everybody is in the morning. Don't try to make an afternoon drive during calving season. It's a terrible idea.
Especially if it gets into like June and July where it's hot.
Yeah.
When the heat gets on, the calves, they just find a good spot, hunker down, and
just
kinda
hang out,
sleep, and then the mothers will come back to them in the cool of the evening, right
so
before dusk.
What we were alluding to is the fact that like we started coming up with all these wacky ideas of trying to figure out how to find calves more effectively, like how to save time.
Yeah.
I got a suggestion for someone to use like thermal imaging, like heat vision goggles or whatever, to be able to like scan like brush and be able to see them, which probably would work, but you'd have to know what area to look for in particular, and sometimes we don't even know that.
Sometimes the paddock's so big that it's like
you'd spend just as much time even if you were able to see like thermally where they were.
Yeah.
But then something we were thinking about is like GPS tags, where if you have usually you see the calf day 1 or day 2 or whatever. If you could get some sort of a tag on it that is either like, I was even thinking, I don't know if people know those what are they called? Tiles. You know what I'm talking about? They're like they're little Bluetooth chips. They're about the size of they're like this big, and they go in your wallet, and then you have an app on your phone, and so you don't lose your wallet. Like you can use the tile in your wallet to like signal the phone, and you can use your phone to signal the tile in your wallet, so you don't like lose one or the other. And so I was thinking, what if you just like super glued a tile to an ear tag, and then you just had your phone and you could like have it make a noise, because
or a collar or something.
Because like usually you like make it buzz or whatever, and so, or make a loud noise so you can go find your wallet, but you can go find the calf because it'd be like ringing or whatever.
And then the calf gets up
and then we figured out that like the range is not long enough for it to make any sense or whatever, and so that wasn't a thing. But then I was talking to my brother, who sort of gets these kinds of things, and is like, yeah, you probably could figure out a way to make a GPS, either make one, or they make them like GPS ear tags or GPS
would just
collars.
cost a lot.
Yeah.
More than we would.
And so then the question was like, well, if you had a GPS collar, could you make a device where you could remotely detach it so that you could go and recover it and put it on a new calf? Because after about a week or two, they don't hide anymore, and so you don't have to deal with it.
And
so
then after a week or two, you can't catch that calf anymore.
Yeah. So. Anyway, just like crazy.
And then you thought about the idea of dogs.
Dogs, like if you could train like a bloodhound or like some sort of like tracking dog to like be able to find like calves. Which I don't know if you could do that, but like that would be so cool. Where like the cows move out of the paddock, and there's a calf back in there, and you just let the dog in there, and it sniffs around and finds the calf and gets it up, and then you can go and bring his mother back around and take the two of them into the new paddock. So.
All right. Thank you guys.
That's a wrap.
Really good.
It was a good one.
Really good one. A lot focused on the sheep and the dogs, which was good.
Which is good. We'll be here next week with any luck. I'm ironing out the YouTube situation, so I've got last week's episode on choosing an enterprise. I've got that basically lined up. With any luck, if I'm feeling it, I'll get it up tonight. But if not, it'll be up by tomorrow night. And I'm gonna try to get this week's episode. I'm gonna try to get that uploaded and finished on YouTube and posted in before the next live stream happens. Like that's the rhythm I'd like to get into, but
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll see if I can get it done.
Stuff happens.
Yep. Anyway, see you all next week. It was fun.
It was really good.
Same time, same place.
Keeling Farms, we're anticipating that update.
Yep. All right. See ya.
See ya.